Mr. Mark Victor Hansen called Relentless. So fasten your seatbelts. We're ready to begin. Mark, Mitzi, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Go ahead, Mitzi. I should have let ladies first.
Okay, I'm excited and happy to be here, and we're on a topic that's dear to my heart, which is neuroscience, because I think our audience is going to be amazed at how much that weaves into Mark's approach to life.
Oh, indeed. And Mark, say hello. And
well, I'm here because Mitzi's here, you're here, and we're all friends. But she wrote this book about Relentless, about this guy Mark Victor Hansen, who, it's just a terrible book. And by the way, I used to say there were two great biographers in America. Now I think there's one superior biographer, and she's on this show.
And we're so glad to have her and you, and to be able to talk about the many different things that we do. I just want to start with Mitzi just very briefly, because Mitzi, you have a family member who is a neuroscientist.
Oh, I'm so proud. My son, Jose Ayala, has a doctorate in neuroscience, a PhD from Harvard University. Yay! So this is his love. He thinks there's just nothing more exciting in life than neuroscience, particularly leads eventually to how you think about the world and artificial intelligence even.
Wow, that is truly wonderful and amazing. And maybe someday we'll be lucky enough to get him on the show too. But in the meantime, Mark and Mitzi together and individually and separately, and of course, Mark with your lovely bride, Crystal Dwyer Hansen, you have impacted so many people around the world for so many years, helping people through your books, through seminars, through workshops, through live events, and one-on-one. I mean, the ways are innumerable. What would you say, given that you've written 318 books, what would you say is the number one thing that people want most in life, that can be addressed through the mind sciences and through behavioral sciences in this way?
Wow. Well, first of all, I think that's the number one question. I teach four things. You got to ask, you got to know what it is you want. Number two, you got to put it in writing, visualize it to realize it, and then have a mastermind dream team like I've got with Mitzi. But the number one question is the profound question, what do I really want? I'm saying my research says 97% of people don't know what they want. They've never really sat down with themselves. They say, well, I graduated college and I got to go take a dumb job, and then I'll work until I'm 55, 65, become a millionaire, 72, whatever. And they're never in the right livelihood. Whereas I would say the opposite, Mitzi and I agree, figure out what is your unique ability that's easy for you to do and hard for everyone else. For the two of us, and I let Mitzi speak for herself, but both of us really love writing. I mean, it is something I have never said this before, but Mitzi, you and I are unstoppable. We can't stop writing. It's just, and communicating and talking. And that really comes out of thinking, because what people really want to do is they want to learn how to ask right, think right, talk right, live right, and then have a life of fulfillment. But more important than that, a life of fulfillment. Because you and I are here. The Bible 365 times says, be in joy. There's only two things: fear not and be in joy. And that's what we're teaching here. And I'm just thankful to do it. But I'll let Mitzi speak for herself. But I think we're in line totally.
Okay, I want to jump in and add to that, which is why I wrote Relentless. My purpose in life is to increase happiness and decrease misery. And I personally decided that Mark Victor Hansen has more wisdom than anybody I've ever come across, and more ability to guide people into leading their fullest, best life. And I thought, wouldn't it be almost, this is so presumptuous of me to say, but we're into honesty here, right? Wouldn't it be a service to humanity to share some of the kind of life-affirming ideas that Mark Victor Hansen has? And by the way, I want to give a kind of testimonial from Mark, which is one of the things that you say in your book, which I'd sort of, I'd always accepted, yeah, it's true, but I'd never really put it into action. And this is the business about ask, about figure out what you want and then go through the steps to get it. Well, I had always, almost from childhood, dreamed of being a war correspondent. I thought at age 81, which is how old I am, the chances of that are pretty slim. But let's put Mark Victor Hansen to a test. Let's see if what I really want to do. All my life I've prepared for this. I've been a writer all my life. I want to be a war correspondent. Somewhere like a couple of months after I finished writing Mark's book, but was focusing on this, I got invited to go to Ukraine to cover a certain aspect of the war that's going on there, and that is human trafficking. And I think that I would bet everything that I own or could own that this wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for following Mark's idea of visualize it, the law of attraction, ask, do it. Cool?
Well, that is awesome. That is beautiful. So let's do this. Let's get to what it is that our audience can begin to do. If they don't know what they want, is it fair to say that they should at least start with what they don't want in order to find out what they do want? Or do you have a method for them to clarify what it is that they do want? Mark?
You want me to go first? So, by the way, Rex, that's exactly correct. You ought to write down all the things you don't want. Like, I don't like work. I don't like whatever. I don't like women like this or men like that or whatever it is that you don't like. And then figure out what you do want and buddy up with somebody. And that's why we said in the Ask book, everybody's got to buy 2 copies for themselves and their spouse or spouse equivalent or mastermind partner, church partner, temple, ashram, mosque partner, and go over it and ask 50 times in a row, what do you want? And they'll start with superficial stuff like I want a new pair of glasses. I want to get my teeth fixed. I want facelift. I want clothes. I want a nice car. All that's good. I want a beautiful home. By the time you hit the depth of your 50, it hits stuff like Mitzi. My whole life, I wanted to be a war correspondent. So obviously she did a pseudonym. Obviously she went to the hottest war we're having that everybody knows about in America, Ukraine. And I've done videos on YouTube about it. She's doing videos on YouTube about it. And we're trying to get the real information out. And what she did, which she won't brag about herself, so I'm going to brag. She got 100,000 people to read this book, Relentless, there. And the letters we've gotten back, in addition to all the testimonials and endorsements, the people said, it gave me hope. And it never dawned on me that people are getting war-torn and shell-shocked and raped and robbed and looted, right? Their country doesn't have what we've got. We've got a guy down in Florida saying, if you loot, I will shoot, which is the right kind of law. We can't allow lawlessness to go on anywhere. And she's courageous, she's bold, she's authoritative, and she is now writing the truth about what happened in Ukraine. So I'm here as her booster rocket to more honesty, truth, and the American way. How's that?
Well, I love that, and it is important to know that your work touches so many people, and the fact that this new book, Relentless, that the proceeds of the book go to help stop human trafficking in Ukraine, and what a wonderful way to use your platform, your influence, your ability to reach out and touch people where it's absolutely needed and desperately needed. So thank you for that. With that said, continuing the conversation, because we're going to circle back around and we'll talk about Relentless. We'll talk about the curbing human trafficking, but you mentioned going deep with these questions. Sometimes just asking the same question repeatedly for long enough is where a breakthrough can happen. I mean, some people think if I do this and I do this and I do this, and in other words, they go all over the place trying to come up with answers instead of just doing a deep dive. And so what you're encouraging people to do is do this deep dive with what is it that I want, and to find what it is that's moving them.
One more thing, and that is before you go to sleep, to cut out all the noise that you're talking about, ask yourself 100 times before you go to sleep, God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? Now tell your spouse or spouse equivalent, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and the answer is going to come, but you've got to get your little butt out of bed, go to wherever you've got something to write with, type with, communicate, and you can't write idea. You got to write in detail what Big G tells you, because your inner knower is attuned to everything. What we're going to talk about is neuroscience, and yeah, you got a body, and yeah, you got a brain, which is filled with stuff at schools, and then you got a mind, which can do two things: has intuition and imagination. But the bigger level that Mitzi and I are going to talk about in neuroscience is you got a soul, which is unlimited and connected to the infinite. And if you're connected to the infinite and you're made in the image and likeness of the infinite, then you've got infinite ability, and you've got infinite, unique ability that only you can discover. I can hold up a mirror, tell you how to do it, which I just did, but then you got to go do the do. Back to you, Rex.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And we'll bring Mitzi in on this too. But it's as above, so below, as above. I mean, from within to without, from without to within. Great ancient mystics and teachers have spoken for eons about, what Hill called infinite intelligence, other people call source, some people call God. However you want to describe it, this connection is what I think what neuroscience is helping us to understand today. And I would submit this: they don't really discover anything new; they just validate stuff that we've known for centuries and centuries and centuries. But they put it into a modern language for us to embrace. And so, the notion of soul, of being in contact with something greater than ourselves, can seem like a new and novel idea to so many people because they've never really heard it expressed the way they're hearing it today. What say you?
I guess I'm up at bat right now. On the question of the inside reflecting the outside and so above, so below, I got to witness that in Ukraine. And I want to share a story with you that it's so neuroscience related. But I was in Ukraine for 5 days. I was in danger areas. I've actually spent time in a bomb shelter when rockets were heading towards the city I was in. When I came, I was kind of expecting, this is a war area. I was sort of kind of expecting a sackcloth and ashes vibe. I was really surprised the first day, the first woman I talked with, she had beautiful bright red nail polish. I saw her the next day. She actually had a manicure and changed her nail polish. This time it was it was yellow and blue. And I'm thinking, she has time for a manicure? So I began noticing. And I think 90% of the women that I saw while I was there, whether it was in cities, whether it was in bombed farmhouses, whether it was in stores, restaurants, police offices, wherever I went, I think that 90% of the women that I saw were wearing nail polish, but fresh, attractive nail polish. And this is kind of surprising to me because I was thinking, your country's being bombed. How could this be? And now we're going to get to the neuroscience part. A couple of days later, after I left Ukraine, I was in London and I was having lunch with a world famous professor who studies terror. And his particular specialty is knowing about World War II and how people got through the concentration camps. Well, I told him the story of how it seemed that wherever I went, the ladies had manicures. And how could that be? And he said, it's not an accident. He said that the people who survive tremendous soul-crushing strain and evil even, if they cling on to beauty, to something that reminds them of normalcy or of civilization, their souls don't get crushed. And he gave an example of this from World War II, told the story of a guy who, during World War II, he was in a concentration camp and he was starving to death. He initially weighed more than 200 pounds. By the time the war was over, he weighed 136. That man who was starving to death every day would save a couple of crumbs from the food that they gave him, and he'd do it to feed a wild bird that would fly in and kind of visit with him and eat the breadcrumbs. And Professor Frank Ferruti told me that guy, he became kind of famous for this because he told the world, I wouldn't have survived if I didn't have that beauty of the wild bird. It kept my spirits alive. The mental attitude of that there's beauty in the world, the man said, kept me alive. And Professor Ferruti said, those women in their nail polish, they're clinging on to just something that's normal and beautiful and not letting their spirits be demolished, which is what the Russians want.
Wow, that is truly a fantastic story. What I would like to add is that what you and Mark are pointing out, what your story references, the idea of nail polish. A lot of people might take that as well in an extreme situation. People did things, but every day, if you wake up and you feel like life is heavy on you, you can do little things like get a manicure. You can take care of your nails. You can get dressed. I was about 10, 11, 12, something like that. And I read Errol Flynn's autobiography. Arguably he may not have written it. It was called My Wicked, Wicked Ways. And the first or second page, he says something to the effect that I was broke. I had no money. I was destitute. So I put on my best suit and I got dressed up. I got dressed to the nines. He didn't use that phrase. And I went out because nobody's going to give you any money. They're not going to hire me as an actor or do anything if I look like I'm broke and I'm poor. So you got to look like you're successful in order to attract success. This is the kind of thing that what I love about what you both do so well and have done for so long is help people do little things that give them significant yardage in terms of moving forward and making profound change in their life. And sometimes it's a little thing like asking yourself the question 50 times or 100 times before you go to bed is a simple thing, but the return on investment can be so exponentially incredible that people sometimes forgo that. And I think that's truly important. You and I, by the way, so that everyone knows, Mitzi and I did a show recently together about Relentless and about Mark. We've also, Mark and Mitzi and I have done separate shows on my other show, Create Your Best Life with Rex, which if you're interested, you can always find on YouTube, or you can search Mark's name and my name and Mitzi's name and my name, and you'll find the shows. But but we were talking about this very sort of thing, and I mentioned the story that somewhere in literature or somewhere, one of the victims of a war camp said the thing that kept him alive was all the while he was there, he kept thinking about how he was going to have a hamburger when he got out. And that was the thing that motivated him, that he had to have a hamburger. He wasn't going to die hamburgerless. And so that is the mindset that he maintained throughout all the years in his prison experience. I'd like to open this up to you. Yes, both of you.
Okay, I wanted to jump in and ask Mark to explain something that I wrote about it in my book, but it's far better if it comes from you than from me. The law of attraction.
Well, by the way, we're talking about the law of attraction intrinsically. Whatever you get magnificently obsessed about, you move towards. Something you think about the last thing before you go to sleep at night, first thing you think about in the morning, because like attracts like. Birds of a feather flock together, and like-minded people flock together. That's why, Mitzi and I probably talk almost every day when she's in the country and I'm in the country. The point is that I want to go back just 2 paragraphs about the law of attraction. During the Depression, the 2 things that were constant to make people feel good, because the top of Maslow's hierarchy looks like self-actualization, but it has truth and beauty at the very top. So those people who are thinking and alive and awake and cosmically conscious and all the things Rex said, the source, the God, infinite intelligence, infinite love, infinite awareness, are truth and beauty. And what's sold during the Depression, Milton Hershey kept 8,000 people alive. That's everybody in a little town called Hershey, PA, and you can go through there and see his museum. But the point is, he made chocolates at a penny each, the same time the Chiclets was made at a penny each, and made a billionaire out of Wrigley. And you can see the Wrigley Mansion where I live here in Arizona, or you go to the island off of LA. I can't think of the name of it right now for some reason. The point is, the other thing is that all the women bought beauty products. So those are 2 things that really make it during bad times. They want entertainment, they want to feel good, and they would like to know about truth and beauty, which is why this show is so well received. Back to you, Rex.
Wow. Well, I would like to throw it back to you in this regard. When you opened up and spoke to us, you mentioned the Bible said two things: fear not, and oops, hold on.
This is the day of the Lord. Rejoice and be glad in it. Joy is 365 times in the Bible, and so is fear not. Those are the only two things that are in every equivalent page of the year of our life. So it is important to live fearlessly, because right now, media's preponderance is to implode on us negativity. And when I went bankrupt in 1974, over 50 years ago now, what happened about 50 years ago now, what happened is that I was reading all the bad news fit to print, which we know what paper that's from. And the point is that the crisis news network just wants to explode into our brain. But what I just realized yesterday, and I was talking to Mitzi about it, is that all that negative news is to sell you towards something. And what you got to do is do what Kipling said, and Mitzi and I are close friends on Kipling, who is my hero, Mark Twain's best friend, said, keep your mind about you whilst all others are losing theirs. Right now, people are losing their minds. And that's why shows like this are important. That's why podcasts are going crazy. That's why my Mark's Minutes on YouTube is doubling every day. I'm looking at the numbers. I'm going, holy cow, this is so exciting. I can't believe it. Because if people want, intrinsically, we know the world's meant to succeed, not fail. And all these guys are saying, we're going to fail. We got too much population, all of which is a bunch of crap. We have a population collapse. We don't have too many people. And the only guy telling the truth is a guy rich enough to do that. That's Elon Musk. And he's got 10 kids. And his father says you ought to have 30. Smart people ought to have more kids. I'm for meritocracy. I'm going to hit one more bully pulpit thing, and that is we don't have a quality of opportunity. We've got a quality of competence. If you're competent, you reign supreme. You become what the guy who created religion at Harvard, which, by the way, just you didn't mention it today, but Mitzi graduated head of her class at Harvard, so she's a superstar there too. I only hang around Harvard people somehow. Jack is third in his class at Harvard. Buckley Fuller in grad school is Harvard. Anyhow, I'm very thankful. And they asked me to teach at Harvard, and I couldn't afford it because it was too cheap. I said, my overhead starts at $2 million a year, my staff. And they said, well, what do you get? He said, prestige. I said, my staff can't eat prestige.
Well, that's beautiful. I would, I want to throw this back also to Mitzi in a second, but I would argue what you just said. This is the day the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. That more than anything is what we should just pay attention to. And I want to circle back through what you said a moment ago. Our conditioning and the media and the powers that be, whether they're visible or invisible to us, seem to have an agenda, and that's to keep us misinformed, struggling, divided, fighting among ourselves so that we never do accumulate enough power or influence or wealth in order to take the lion's share from them. Now, there are people like yourselves who are both very, very successful and wealthy, and yet, you talk about when you were bankrupt, when you went bankrupt. So you're no strangers to hardship. But there are those very, very wealthy people who would be very happy to misinform people, give you parts of the secret, but not give you all of the secret so that you can't make it. But that's not you. You are giving it away freely. Mitzi's giving it away freely. You're there to try and help people to get a leg up and to move up and to live the kind of lives that they can live, the kind of lives you're living. And when it comes to fear not or rejoice, so many people are telling people to work hard, struggle, do all these other things, add these 50 things in, do that 25 stuff, and then 10x this and 10x that, when really, isn't it just a pretty simple formula? Fear not and rejoice. And if we could learn how to do that easily, we'd be so much ahead of the game.
Well, that makes me think of a theme that runs through Relentless, which is Mark regularly attributes at least a part of his success to tithing and giving back. And my theory of life is that we're here to serve one another. And somebody get me the exact quote, but what you do unto the least of men, you do unto me.
Yes, what you do to the least of them, you do it to me. Yes, absolutely. Okay,
and I'm thinking of something that I was brought up with. My father was the co-founder of the Sheraton Hotel, so we grew up in the lack of luxury, the lap of luxury. But it was just instilled to us for me and my siblings from childhood that we're there to serve. We're to get our identity for helping others, not by spending money. And, you know, I think that kind of thing brings joy. And it reminds me of something that when I was maybe, I'm going to guess 10 years old, it was a Saturday and I went wandering into my father's office, which he had an office in our home. And there he is going through ledgers and books. And I'm thinking, Daddy, as I ask him, oh, how come you aren't, you know, it's a nice sunny day. How come you aren't playing golf with your friends instead of here with all these books and ledgers and things? And he said, well, what I'm doing is I'm answering charitable requests. And then he said something that I think is what life's about. He said, the greatest joy my money ever gave me was in giving it away. So, and now to circle back to Relentless, it seems to me, and Mark, you're allowed to correct me, but I'll scream and have a tantrum if you do. It seems to me that just weaving through the entire book at every moment is how you can help others and how you can tithe. And you say over and over again in 100 different ways that acts of serving others, particularly through tithing, you feel energized you, propelled you towards some of the success that you've had. Now let's see if I get to have my screaming tantrum or if he agrees with what I said.
I love everything she said, but the little book's called The Miracle of Tithing, which business people who don't know any better say, what's a miracle of tithing? I said, you haven't been tithed enough lately. But it teaches tithe your thinking, which is the first thing every charitable organization ought to do, and only give to charitable organizations that spend less than 10% on administration. And Mitzi, I took her to Horatio Alger Awards with us this year. They don't spend anything. They spend 10% on administration, but it comes on top. All the money that we raise goes to getting 35,000 kids scholarships, either for university, at-risk kids, or skill training or entrepreneurship training. Anyhow, tithe your thinking, which is all of us can do that. It doesn't cost anything, but 10%, 1 day out of 10, you got to do that, or 1 hour out of 10. Tithe your thinking, your time, your talent, your treasures. And then the bonus point, number 5, is be thankful that you had it to give. All of us have more to give. And the minute you give, you expand. And the best metaphor I've ever come up with, Bob Allen and I are at the Maui Writers Convention, walking in the wonderful ocean. And at 6 a.m. before we're to talk that day, he says, explain tithing with regard to the water. I said, well, when you don't tithe, it's like frozen water. It doesn't move. When you do tithe just a little, it's ambient. It's still dangerous. If an airplane crashes down or if you belly flop in water, you damn well know it stings, right? But if you give, like 1 drop of water on your mirror in your bathroom in the morning steams up the whole thing. It expands. When you tithe, 10% expands. And you say that isn't physically possible. It isn't the laws of physics. Because in neuroscience, we're saying, hey, look, it's metaphysical. What happens is Einstein taught my teacher, Buckminster, Dr. Fuller, is at the top of physics is metaphysics. It's understanding. And that's why Einstein said imagination's more important. In fact, and that's what she's saying. You can't see it because we go out of the 3 dimension where we live and think that's it into the 4th dimension. In the 4th dimension, everything is all things are possible, is what the big guy said. And that's where when you give, the world opens up to you, and the sky vault opens up and pours down such a rich reward you can't receive it. And so I agree with Mitzi's daddy and Mitzi, because Mitzi, I just talk for her, and I shouldn't do this, but she is excessively charitable.
Wow. Well, I want to circle back again in a moment, but I want to point something out about Relentless and about the books that you write, Mitzi and you, Mark, and to say that I'm thrilled to know you. And I would make this argument with most people that there are people out there who don't have anything. You know, they always say, don't listen to your broke relatives tell you how to make money kind of thing, because they don't know either, or they wouldn't be broke. But a lot of people at that level have those conversations with those people. And Jim Rohn said, you know, you're the average of the 5 people closest to you, or your income's the average of the 5 people close to you. When people are at your level, or when you have a certain amount of success and you get up there and you're really doing well, the conversations are different. They're like, what do we create? What do we want to do? How do, you know, I mean, they're not the same kind of conversations that are going on down here, I would argue. And in the same way, I've got you muted because there's some feedback. So go ahead.
Down here can't get up there unless they have that up there conversation, which is right? You got a little being and a big being, but there shouldn't be any poor beings. Mitzi and I are friends with Dr. Muhammad Yunus, got a Nobel Prize for creating microcredit, microfinance. He said poverty belongs in one place, the museum. And we really agree with it. I've been with him a bunch of times. I love this guy. He has taken the poorest country in the world and gotten everybody to earn money by lending them $25. And he's raised now $9 billion in the poorest ragtag country. And he is bringing it forth just like Senior Minister Lee did Singapore. I worked in Singapore. I've been to Singapore and worked there. And now there's flowers on every boulevard and everybody's rich. Everybody retires a millionaire. It's all consciousness. We don't have to have poverty. We just got faceless bureaucrats that are idiots that don't understand anything about real economics. And there's two levels of economics. I don't want to take, I want Mitzi to talk on this too, because she's really articulate. But the level of economics we're taught is Malthusian. The population is going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, and food is arithmetic. She's had 40,000 food women. She knows more than I ever will about food, but we've had breakthroughs with crop rotation, planning, all kinds of honest stuff to have organic, good, wholesome food. And she does 22 million chickens a week in her thing. And then you got, Darwin saying we're not going to make it. And then that's what the idiots are believing, the faceless bureaucrats. There's more than enough if we go into creative, spiritual, light, enlightened consciousness. That's what I'm saying. And Mitzi, would you talk to that, please? Just from a farm point of view. Could we build enough food right in America for the world?
First of all, yes, but, and there's a great big but, we have to be smart about it. And I have the feeling that a lot of regulators, I wonder how much trouble I'm going to get in. How long was I muted? Did you hear the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we've barely scratched the surface of how much food we can produce. I'll just give a short example. I get to hear, it crosses my desk because my family's in agriculture, some of the ways that we can increase food that we're not doing yet, but we know how. When you imagine a great big, let's say soybeans, or it could be corn, hundreds and hundreds of acres. There are machines that we have right now that can go through the fields. Maybe it's on some kind of boom where it's going to. I'm doing this by eyeballing it. I don't actually know, but supposing it's a 50-foot boom that goes low over the field from the tractor that's pulling it, and it can take images of each plant. And it can tell, this one needs more fertilizer. Oh, this particular one's being attacked by a pest. Oh, this one's not getting enough water. And right there in real time, from different nozzles, it can provide each plant what that plant needs. That means that we're using, I've heard estimates of it's between 1/10 and 100th the amount of fertilizer or pesticides or herbicides. And since the plant's getting what it absolutely needs for optimal health, it's going to produce much, much better with a tiny fraction of the inputs that we're using right now. Those kinds of things, they're just about ready to come into production. They aren't really on any scale yet, but we're doing such fantastic things. I think agriculture is as exciting as anything in the world. I'm not hearing you.
No. Mark, were you going to say something? I mute each other because of the feedback. So go ahead.
Thank you, Rex. I'd like to add what she said is that Mitzi is helping out my publishing company called Mark Victor Hansen Library.com. But we got two little guys that have both made a fortune. The littlest one is 12 that I want to talk about. He made $250,000 in real estate. He owns 14 properties. He's bought them all himself. Both brothers are becoming Eagle Scouts. Both brothers have black belts. Both brothers have great parents that love them. Anyhow, little Ethan and I were talking. I said, Ethan, what is your biggest goal? He says, I don't think anybody should be hungry, Mark. And I said, me either. I said, I got an idea if you do it. And we're doing his book. The book comes out next month, Treehouse. He's going to facilitate the planting, and Mitzi taught me a lot about this one, of 1 trillion fruit, edible trees with exactly the same technology Mitzi's talking about. And we're writing his fiction that he's making real. And it is using drones that plant all the places that are plantable. And the story based when he and I and his parents were on the phone originally, his dad, I said, you know Johnny Appleseed's story, and at 12 years old he didn't know it. And I said, well, look, there's this guy named John Chapman who I'm really keen on because I was asked to write the movie about Johnette Chapman, Johnny's theoretical daughter. But John Chapman planted 15,000 trees. Well, that was a heck of a job from New York to Ohio, all apple trees, of course. And Bob Schuler says anyone can count the seeds in an apple, but nobody can count the apples in the seed. Well, the fact is one apple tree lives 100 years and has 1 million apples. So it is really a great exponential multiplier. And that's how this whole book starts. And we're saying, hey, look, there should be nobody. And Mitzi, I don't talk for her very often, and she could object to this, but we can theoretically feed everyone. And she's right. We got to be comprehensively smart about it. And my degree, one of them, is in comprehensivity with Bucky Fuller, and because he was a comprehensive anticipatory design science, Einstein's best student as far as I'm concerned. But the point I'm making is that we could do it if we had the will to do it. But what I'm saying is the will to do it, and I think Mitzi will go along with this, and Rex, you will, is it's got to be an entrepreneurial activity where we find a problem and solve it. Now, here's what Mitzi told me when I ran this by her. She said, look, you don't understand. There's no graft in this. Mitzi, isn't that what you said?
Yeah, that's the big obstacle. In fact, I'm going to draw a parallel between the United States and Ukraine right now. Russia is trying to bomb apartment buildings, schools, churches, everything they can to demoralize people and create fear. But then when I turn on the news here in the United States, there's so much fear that's just we're awash in fear. And I almost think it has, on a different scale, the same effect. It's a little bit paralyzing. Instead, why don't we open up our minds and think of the positive and what we can do rather than be angry at each other because of the wrong pronouns or misgendering or something. I mean, that's thinking small. I want to think huge.
Wow. That is, can you hear me? That is really impressive. I mean, both of you are so dedicated to helping humans. You know, I say there's no such thing as humanity. There's only humans. When we talk about humanity, we miss the point. We make it a collection as opposed to the individuals that we encounter every single day around the world. I would venture in this conversation that there's enough food to feed everybody on the planet as it is right now. The problem is distribution. The problem is graft. The problem is government and bureaucracies all around the world, and people trying to take their lion's share. And that's been going on since the dawn of humankind. I mean, you know, the pyramids weren't built with with a bunch of entrepreneurs going, go out and here, I'll give you a living wage to do that. So, you know, we've had problems for eons. But I want to circle back because you both. But before I do, let me say that Mark, Mitzi, you are welcome on All Things Rex Worldwide anytime to continue this conversation. We can do that. And if not on All Things Rex, we can do it on my other show, Create Your Best Life with Rex, because this is such an important conversation and the work you do is so important. And I want to draw in a distinction between what you both do and what some do. I mentioned the autobiography of Errol Flynn, most likely ghostwritten. Most books by the big name people who we read are probably ghostwritten. And or those people who their subject matter is you don't often get to talk to, or they may not even know what's in the book. And so the information that they're providing you, like if I read a book on, I don't want to name names, but any of the major corporate owners or rich people in the world or power brokers, politicians, religious leaders, or otherwise, that is probably not very correct. You know, that there's a misinformation in it, some on purpose, some inadvertent. But here we have both of you who have you've written a book on Mark, and you've written books together, and I've got both of you right here, and you're sharing your work, and we can actually talk about your work and talk about what's working and what doesn't work, you know, out in the real world. And lastly, I would add this, you mentioned the apple and the seed, and to plant a seed brings all this bounty harvest later on. In the Bible, you know, Jesus, whether you believe the story or not, but it's a great story, fed countless number of people with 5, bread and fish. The bread and fish were there. It wasn't like, let's manifest it out of the air. It's like, bring me what you have and we will multiply it. Let's take this, and it was passed among the people so that they could be satiated, they could be filled, and so that people could. I always argue that Jesus is not the exception. Jesus is the example. You know, and as we're talking about this, I talk about this all the time. That he didn't ever say, "I've healed you. I'm the good guy. Put your faith so much in me." He would say, "Your faith has made you whole. Go and sin no more." And he helped empower those people to find the fullness of life and to live by where he directed their attention. That was to their belief and their ability to transform themselves and to rejoice. And then also, as Mitzi said, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. You know, if the greatest commandment is to love God first and love your neighbor as yourself, then we have an obligation from the big beyond to help each other, to feed the world, whether that's food, which is great, or spiritual nourishment, or financial nourishment, or whatever. What say you? Am I on or off here?
I'll talk first, and Mitzi can talk. But the absolute question is, you're on, and the whole story about feeding 5,000. Remember, that's only men were counted, women weren't counted, and kids weren't counted. So there were probably 12 to 15,000. He fed them, and then what most people miss is the next line. It had 12 baskets left over. Now that's twofold. Number one, that's packing it up for another day. So there's fundamental abundance that's going to continue in a physical, and mental, and spiritual way. But number two, there's no waste, and we're wasting right now. I'm part of a company called QCI and Reminding America. What all of us create 5 pounds of garbage a day, and one guy who's good friends with Mitzi and I, Dean Rose in Ann Arbor, Michigan, has built this company, spent $300 million, 20 years. And he's taking every garbage dump and taking it out and squishing it out in 60% water. He can take glass to glass, metal to metal, plastic to plastic. No one's ever done that before. And suddenly the stuff that's going to kill us is now a resource. One of the things I wrote when I was in graduate school, I had 10 mega goals, is that I wanted to take every liability and turn it into an asset. Well, this guy's done that. So I'm just partnering with him, and I'm doing his book called Trash to Cash right now as we speak. And the point is, we have all abundance that we need, but we've got to be thankful for it, use our right thinking and right asking. And with that, I give it back to you, Mitzi. There you go. You're unmuted.
Okay. I've mentioned before that weaving through this entire book is your, what I take to be generosity of spirit. But it makes me think of something that my late husband, Frank Purdue, used to say. He said, if you want to be happy, think what you can do for somebody else. On the other hand, if you really want to be miserable, think what's owed to you. And I think one of the biggest payoff deals in the world is to be generous and think what you can do for others, because it does lead to happiness. So my recommendation for everybody is copy Mark Victor Hansen and be a giver.
That is beautiful. I mean, I'm so happy you said that, and I want to come back around again, and that is to the book and the fact that this is about Mark. We're going to have to talk about that before we have to leave, and how they can get the book and how they can help this this movement that you have going in stopping human trafficking in the Ukraine. How when they purchase the book, the money, the proceeds go to that cause. So that's very important for us to talk about and address, but also to talk about the book and about the man whose book is about. I surely want to do that. And again, I'm so thrilled that you're here. I have a second question in all of that. Obviously, people are going to go, how do I get the book and that? But you're talking about so many really wonderful, life-changing, life-transforming experiences for people all around the world, financially, spiritually, health, mentally health, all this, feeding them and everything else. Is there a way that people can help the cause, help you, or become enlisted in this journey with you in some way, as opposed to just, saying, okay, well, I bought the book and now I'm going to go read it? Is there somewhere that they can say, I want to be a foot soldier, I want to help out?
Oh, I love that question. The easiest way is Amazon. And I'm perfectly happy if you get the, no, we don't have it in Audible yet. We ought to consider having it in Audible. But for the moment, it's on Kindle, and then it's softcover and it's hardcover. But whichever way you buy it, every penny of the royalties is going to go to combating human trafficking in Ukraine. And But since Rex was kind enough to ask, how else could you help? I have a suggestion. If you'll go to my website, and it's mitziperdue.com, there's a contact me part. Write to me and I'll get back to you, because I would love people who want to help. And my particular issue at the moment is, well, overall it's human trafficking, but it's particularly human trafficking in Ukraine. Because here's what happens. And let me quick define what human trafficking is, because although most people might know, some might not. Human trafficking is the equivalent of modern day slavery. And very often it's sex trafficking, at least in Ukraine it is. What they'll do is, say there's a woman who's tired, exhausted, at the end of her wits, and she's trying to cross over the border from Ukraine to, let's say, Poland. Anyway, there she is. She's just making her way across. She's out of her mind with fear and fatigue. And this kindly guy comes up to her and says, "Oh, I'd like to help you. Oh, I can help you find work. And for tonight, I can get you a hot meal and a place to stay. But the van is leaving in 10 minutes. Get in." And here's what happens to her. And we know this because some women have been rescued, like in Turkey or Dubai or somewhere. She'll be gang raped 30 times that night. And then she'll be sold for sex like 10 or 12 times a night from then on until she dies. I mean, I think it's a fate worse than death. But there's a lot that can be done to prevent it. And a very inexpensive way where even, $5, $10 is going to make a difference. If at the border, there could be people who could direct this woman, what's there, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of women in this state. If they could be directed to have a timeout for like 24 hours in a shelter where people could tell them, beware, there are traffickers on the other side, they wouldn't make a terrible decision of getting in that van and losing their life. So how do you get to that? Here, text the word up, stands for Ukrainian police. Text up to 55312, and you'll be taken to a page that will tell you where you can make a donation. But I wish on top of that, you'd write to me, Mitzi at mitziperdue.com. And I'm assuming that that's going to be in the show notes, because I'm probably talking way too fast for anybody to write it down. But I promise I'll answer anybody who writes to me, because this thing is just so evil, so cruel, so unkind. Anything that we can do about it is going to make a fantastic difference in people's lives. So buy the book. The royalties are all going to go to that cause. Or if you want to donate on top of that, text up to 55312. I'm not hearing you. Are you hearing me?
Hopefully we'll get that in the ticker so that people can read it. That was text up 55. What was that again?
55312.
Text UP 55312.
Yes. And by the way, if you'll make even a dollar donation, there's another added benefit for this, which is right now, the police in Ukraine, they were the prime target after the military of the Russian invaders, because they know that when there's lawlessness, people are even more discouraged and disheartened. But the police are disheartened because their police stations have been bombed, their patrol cars stolen, their communications destroyed. Anything that we can do to let them know that there are people in America who care about them, it's going to be such a shot in the arm for them. So if you'll make a donation, I'll make sure that they see this great long list. And I talk with people in Ukraine at least every other day. And they really care that they've got friends who are on their side and doing things for them.
So I want to point out, do they need to put the word UP in there? Up? Okay, so the ticker's not correct. It's text up UP at 55312. Is that correct?
That's exactly it. Text up to 55312.
Okay, cool. And then they can write Mitzi at mitziperdue.com.
Exactly. And I promise I'll answer every one.
That's fantastic. Mark has something to say. Let's get Mark.
Rex, Mitzi, you gotta ask for cars right now. The cars you and I are working with Dean on right now. Ask somebody else. Some of these people donate some cars. Some people have old Hertz cars or Avis cars or Dent-A-Rent or whatever. We don't care where they come from. Go ahead.
Okay, anybody who's got contact with one of the big automotive companies, we need 23 police cars. And here's what they're needed for and why they'll make a difference in global health. In the Chernobyl police, and Chernobyl, you know, the place where the big explosion was 36 years ago, there's 1,000 square miles that are so highly radioactive that it's called the exclusion area. People aren't allowed in them. But the trouble is they've got something like 1 million tons of highly irradiated scrap metal. And that might mean like old cars or refrigerators or just stuff. The population of that area was 385,000 people. So a lot of people lived there. They left. And now there's all this irradiated scrap metal. And the poachers drive up with their trucks and pull off with, you know, tens of thousands of tons of lethally radiated scrap metal, which goes into the world's scrap metal market. And it's going to cause people like various cancers. People, you know, you won't die right off if you're exposed to it. But suppose a doorknob was made from an ex-refrigerator in that area. Over the years, you might get a blood cancer or a tumor or blindness or just slowly and painfully die. And you'll never know why. But it could have come from the scrap metal poachers in Chernobyl. Now, the police used to prevent this because the Chernobyl police would patrol the highly irradiated areas. And when they catch a poacher, they put them in jail for 15 years. So they had a huge deterrent force. But the Russians destroyed the police fleet. So now there's nothing to stop or deter the poachers. And it's a global health hazard because highly irradiated, deadly material is leaving every day and there's no way to stop it. So my ask, if you have connections with a decision maker in one of the big car companies, please let me know because I'd like to make a presentation to them. And by the way, there would be a lot in it for whatever car company steps up to the plate because I think between Mark and me and our friends, we can guarantee global publicity for those 23 cars that would be donated.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for sharing all of that to the audience here at the Neuroscience Summit. I do also want to say.
You just froze. So what happens is, assuming you can hear me, Mitzi, because I can see you're muted, but he is frozen. So I'm supposed to keep talking. What we're talking about here, it says get relentless. Ladies and gentlemen.
Now I can't hear Mark. Oh, we're back. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do in the last few minutes. I want to talk about Relentless and have Mitzi talk about you as the subject of this book before we have to leave the audience here. And again, I'd love to have you back on my show, All Things Rex Worldwide, anytime, or Create Your Best Life with Rex, so we can further this discussion. But we got about 5 minutes, and I was hoping to spend a little bit more time talking about Mark and your work in the book. So please.
Well, I'd like nothing better because since this is about have your best life with Rex, here's a way to do it. The feedback that I get from this book, I think it's close to almost incomprehensible. It's so favorable. And at some point, I want the camera to go to Mark and see him nod if he agrees with what I'm saying. But I bet I've had, I haven't counted. It could be 500 letters from people saying that it changed their life. Like one guy, he said that I was suicidal. And I read this book and I read about when Mark himself, when he was in his mid-20s, I don't think he ever would have actually jumped off a bridge, but he wasn't sure that he had a reason to live. And then that darkest moment, he asked God, what am I here for? And, just sort of from the depth of his soul, he's asking this question and he got an answer. And the answer was, what do you want to do, Mark? Well, circling back to the guy who wrote me the letter, he said that he himself had been going through a really dark time, the letter writer, and that when he read this and realized that somebody as successful and brilliant and knowledgeable and wise as Mark had had such a tough time and that he had pulled through it, the writer of the letter said, "I have renewed hope. I'm not going to end my life. I'm going to use this as a jumping off place to be better than ever." And, I suppose that's the strongest letter I got, but it's pretty much the flavor of almost every letter I get, where people say that it gives them inspiration. It makes them think bigger. It makes them energized to try harder and to not give up. And one of the stories that a lot of the letter writers refer to is the number of times Chicken Soup for the Soul was turned down. I think it was 143. Can you imagine being sort of kicked in the teeth 143 times and being so relentless that you don't give up? And then the 144th time, it turns out to be the best-selling, the series Chicken Soup for the Soul turned out to be the biggest seller of all time for nonfiction books, more than 500 million books. I have a personal opinion that the greatest gift one person can give another is inspiration, because it gives you the energy and the hope and the bigger vision. But it also gives you direction. So it gives you inspiration, gives you both energy and direction. And I wrote this book. I had a dozen reasons for writing it, but possibly the biggest is I feel that the world is hurting right now, and that a book like this can help heal some of that hurt, and not just heal the hurt, but help people look beyond and become greater than they ever intended.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to step on you. Go ahead. We got about 2 minutes left, so I want to make sure that you finish what you're saying and get Mark back in.
Well, let me invite Mark to finish with his final thoughts, because I've been rattling on.
Well, first of all, I like everything Mitzi's got to say, of course, but she let me write a poem that we put on the back cover called Relentless. And your life is about relentlessly pursuing excellence. What a good idea, because if you chase excellence, you get everything else. Relentlessly discovering my destiny code, which is what we said. You got to say, God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? Relentlessly creating, innovating, and entrepreneuring. Everybody is an entrepreneur, according to the guy we were talking about, Muhammad Yunus, during this show. Everyone can relentlessly go the extra mile, because what the big guy said, Jesus said, the first mile doesn't count. You got to go a second mile. Relentlessly self-promoting and advancing yourself, the issues you believe in. And obviously we're promoting ourselves a little bit, but we're really saying, let's make the world work for everybody. Let's get rid of human trafficking. Let's get rid of low-mindedness. Relentlessly serving greatly with love, which is what we're about. Relentlessly loving for the sake of loving, caring for the sake of caring, sharing for the sake of sharing. Relentlessly exuding enthusiasm, which I think you can see in spades in this show. Relentlessly tithing and contributing to noble, helpful, and honest is a big underlying word, causes. Relentlessly increasing the quality and quantity of our service. Relentlessly working to make the world work for 100% of humanity. I am so thankful. Mitzi said, why don't you write an afterword poem? And I go, well, Bucky always did ventilated prose, so I guess I could do it. And I did. I liked it. For me, it was fun. So I hope all of you that read it catch it and get bolstered with inspiration, like, because Mitzi always says you got to have inspiration, to have the dedication, to have the perspiration to the destination of your heart's desire.
Wow. I want to thank you both for being here and taking the time to be here with our audience here at the Neuroscience Summit and on All Things Rex Worldwide. I really do appreciate that. And just one of the reasons that I think people ought to go get your book, and that's just one, not to mention all the other reasons why they want to get that, is that you both are here, you're both alive, you're both available, you've been on the show, we'll do some more of this, but they get to understand the mind and the practice of Mark Victor Hansen and Mitzi Perdue and how you're contributing to the world. And that's a very unique experience for most people, because as I said earlier, much of the books, are written by people who don't know the person. They don't reveal the accurate truth of what's going on. And you're both here to help the world in such profound, and positive and powerful ways. I can't thank you enough. I know my audience can't thank you enough. Go get Relentless, and go be sure to text Mitzi at up55312 or write her at mitzi@mitziperdue.com. And Mark Victor Hansen has ask at 2100 or 21000. You can see it on the screen. Don't let me massacre that any further. But you both, go ahead, Mark.
No, I'm just having fun. This is good.
You guys have been so wonderful. I thank you so much for being here. And we're going to have to say so long for now during the summit, but we'll all be back together again sometime soon. Keep doing what you're doing. And as I always say when I end my show, I say,
Lisa Nichols here.